found to be very healthy. They appeared to have very good diets. They weren't starving or didn't appear to be.
The Spanish there, they went so hungry that they had to eat their leather belts. They were absolutely incapable of fishing or hunting in the forest. So the admiration that they must have had for these Indians who could furnish them a great amount of food. And they talk about maize, about bread, probably manioc bread. They talk about fish and turtles and all sorts of nuts and fruits.
Orellana's account was quite literally unique. No later traveller confirmed what he'd seen.
When you compare the chronicles from the 16th into the 17th century, you see something totally different. 100 years later, they all have disappeared. I mean, those large settlements, they will find just, you know, a house or two, a village or two, things like that.
Where were all the people and all the towns that Orellana had reported seeing? Could he have concocted a fictitious account? Or had something cataclysmic happened?
And there's argument about that. So was he exaggerating his claims for the Spanish court, or was it accurate?
On his return to Spain, Orellana fell out of favour with the court, and as a result his extraordinary account of the Amazon went unpublished for centuries. What we do know now is that in the Amazon, like the rest of South and North America, the arrival of Europeans like Orellana and subsequent colonists and missionaries brought catastrophe for the indigenous population.
The people who lived on those places disappeared because of diseases, slavery, warfare. They were like, you know, the spread of disease was very, very strong. Smallpox, the flu, they had a very strong effect on those people.
It's thought that maybe up to 90–95% of indigenous peoples were actually decimated by European diseases to which they had very little resistance.
So what Europeans after Orellana saw when they visited the Amazon was a sparsely populated region inhabited by the few survivors of these devastating waves of disease.
By the 18th century, we begin to see the description of forests, pristine forests.
From that time onwards, the idea of the forest that held sway in Europe, America, and even in Brazil itself was the Amazon as a pristine paradise, empty of people. And as the 20th century progressed, this empty land looked ripe for exploitation. In the 1970s, the military government of Brazil saw in the vastness of the Amazon an opportunity to expand the country's economy and solve the problem of a burgeoning population of landless peasants. Grand road-building projects were slicing through the forest to give access for the development of cattle ranches and farms.
It was a very interesting and probably not so good time for the Amazon in the 70s. There were many different programs going on to populate the Amazon. They thought it was a land without people. And so they were looking for people without land in several parts of Brazil and sending these people there.
But even as the trees were being felled, experts were questioning one of the basic assumptions behind the government's campaign, that the green forest meant fertile land. New research was revealing the unexpected nature of the Amazonian soils, and an American archaeologist called Betty Meggers would use this to redefine the way we think about the Amazon ecosystem.
The soil is very infertile, so you've got to fertilize it all the time. And then the first rain washes it out, so it's not a viable situation.
You've got high temperatures, you've had high rainfall there for many millions of years. So you've had chemical leaching, chemical weathering that has long since sort of weathered away and washed away all the valuable minerals and nutrients from the soil. And on top of that, you don't tend to get the accumulation of leaf litter and the organic humus that you find in this part of the world. Any organic material that falls onto the forest floor is very rapidly decomposed and recycled and put back into the living material again. So it ends up back in the trees very, very quickly.
And as the deforestation continued regardless, the scientists were proved right.
They cut down all the trees and the next crop was smaller, and then pretty soon the soil was exhausted and they didn't get anything. And everything that's been tried has demonstrated the non-feasibility of dense sedentary cultivation and so forth.
In other words, the forest may look lush, but it is not fertile. Or as Betty Meggers put it in 1971, the Amazon was a counterfeit paradise.
The idea of a counterfeit paradise. The idea that under that apparent, the apparent sense of abundance, of richness of resources, lies a very fragile, frail and difficult environment to be managed by people.
In Meggers' view, the only kind of agriculture the Amazon could support was the kind of small-scale cultivation practiced by many of today's indigenous population. It's called slash-and-burn agriculture, and it's a way of farming sustainably on poor soil. A patch of forest is cleared, and the crops are grown until the soil is nearly exhausted.
At the end of 3 years, the fields stop producing, so they go cut another one and move around and have a territory in which, they can maintain a population that's sustainable. If they get too big a one, they're going to end up with people not having enough to eat.
So you would never establish a big settlement for a long period of time in the same place because you didn't have resources to maintain that group. So that was her first argument.
Betty Meggers subscribed to a mid-20th century school of thought that related the size and complexity of human societies to their environment. Harsh environments would limit the development of culture.
This theory also said that in the tropics, not only could humans not develop as a biological